Hello and welcome to the Happy Healthcare Professionals live show. We are back. Yay! I'm so excited to be with you today. I hope you're well wherever you are watching from. And if you end up watching this on the replay, then I hope you're well as well. It's really hot right now. And I'm not going to complain because we have been looking forward to this for a really long time. But it is just amazingly hot, isn't it? I hope that you're well wherever you are. And before I dive into today's show, let me just introduce myself. If you don't know who I am, then let me introduce myself. My name is Komal. I'm a former national level pharmacist turned business strategist and coach to pharmacy professionals. And I absolutely love helping pharmacy professionals to find and create work that they absolutely love. And this show, I love to discuss topics that are really going to help us think about us as a profession, really kind of help us to push the boundaries a bit more and really think outside the box. And today's session and today's live is no different from any other live show or episode that you may have watched. We are talking about female community pharmacy owners. Now, I was looking at the data on this today, and it is pretty shocking. There are only 2% of female pharmacists who own community pharmacies. And I have to say, I was really, really shocked at that statistic because we make up the vast majority of the profession. 62% of us are female, and yet only 2% of us own community pharmacies. So on today's show, I have got one of the most amazing community pharmacist owners, and she is obviously female, and she is an incredible pharmacist who went from nursing to becoming a pharmacist and now owns her own very own community pharmacy. She's also on the Community Pharmacy Expert Advisory Committee. And I cannot wait to introduce her. So let me bring her on. It's Patricia Ojo. Hi, Patricia.
Hi there, Komal. Thank you very much for having me here. Good to see you.
It's such a pleasure. I love having conversations with you because, you know, we've had several conversations these past few years about pharmacy and, you know, community pharmacy and how we can kind of, you know, bring ourselves, you know, bigger and better and, you know, improve us as a profession. And I'm just really, really happy to have you here. So tell me or tell us about yourself, Patricia. What's your story?
Wow. How much time have you got? Thank you very much, Komal. It's really, I'm very, grateful that you've actually asked me onto this show today. And thank you. I'm hoping that, you know, as you say, we make up a minority of the female pharmacy owners. And I will tell you my story. My story is a little bit long, but I'm going to keep it really, really brief. As you already alluded to, I am a pharmacy owner, and actually my background is in nursing. So if I say that many decades ago, I came to England to basically join the sixth form and, you know, sort of study. And I think my parents' plans were for me to go to medical school because, as with many of our parents from the diaspora, you know, sort of who came over here, it was a better education for the children. And my parents were very forward thinking. So the girls were equally to be as educated as the boys. So I basically went into a nice convent school, having left a convent boarding school, and basically was studying the sciences really with the intention of going to med school. That was really how the journey started. Suffice to say that didn't happen. And I spent some time doing my research and you know, sort of spending some time with my cousin who lived, you know, sort of and breathed really all things medical because her husband was a consultant obstetrician. You know, I got talking to friends and they said, you know, it sounds like what you really wanted to do is really care for people. And certainly nursing wasn't very far off because my mother actually, who was a nurse, became a midwife. My father, who was also a nurse actually, and you know, sort of being being a medical rep. So you can see where the story and the interest actually starts to develop. To cut a very long story short, I applied to go into School of Nursing many years ago, and I ended up doing registered general nursing. And while I was doing the course, I mean, going back, this preceded the times when the nursing was a degree course. And while I was studying, I felt that I needed something that would challenge me a little bit more academically. But I thoroughly was loving every single placement that I went to, from elderly medical, surgery, you name it. I absolutely loved it. So there was no question of me actually dropping out of the course. Although I really don't hasten to add that within the first few placements, quite a significant number of my colleagues had also dropped out of nursing, because it was a tough, 60% of the time was actually on placements, and only 40% of that was the, sort of academic learning. So it was one of those that you went in as a 20-year-old, you were working full time basically and studying as well. By the breaks that you had between placements or going to lectures. So from that point of view, you were really inducted into serious work very, very early on. But I loved what I was doing. So I carried on with my nurse training, and I had every intention of completing that course. Probably by the end of my first year, I thought, my background, where my parents, my father certainly was a medical representative for a few pharmaceutical companies, and he detailed for them in the whole of the west coast of Africa, etc. It almost became like a natural thing for me that I wanted to, sort of study pharmacy. So I applied to go to the School of Pharmacy, and lo and behold, I was admitted pretty much straight away, with the only school that I actually thought to apply for. So from that point of view, I knew through my nursing training that I was probably going to go on to do or study pharmacy, which I did do. The nursing was a great facilitator for me, from the point of view of I had already been immersed in the background of giving out medication, supporting patients with medication, sort of dealing with all things medicine. I certainly knew when they were prescribed. I just didn't know how medicines were. So from the point of view of pharmaceutics and really the pharmacology of it, it wasn't, sort of the depth of what I studied as a nurse, but I certainly was very, very comfortable around things that were medicines, or certainly around the whole clinical aspects of, what we would study at university. So it was a very, very easy transition for me to make. And of course, I very much enjoyed the project work and really looking at innovative things. So I remember my final year project really revolved around the drug delivery of drugs, protein drugs. So really was looking at how we would do that. And I remember doing my final year projects on using carbon particles to try and attach protein drugs, a bit like insulin, really, to see whether or not those could then be used to deliver protein drugs so that they didn't get broken down. That sort of helped me, I left school, so university with a first class degree, and I really enjoyed that. So really, while I was there, you go on to your professional subjects. Everybody was picking areas that they wanted to be in, and I think it was probably apparent. Apparently, my friends knew this, but I didn't really know this. But everyone signed a book for me saying, we can't wait to see you in your multi-million-pound pharmacy. And I thought, wow, that's big. That was not something that I had in mind, but I certainly knew that I wanted to be a community pharmacy owner.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of how that was going to happen. Of course, going back and, sort of, if you get the history, I went to university as a mature student. So as soon as I finished, I remember my course tutor wanting me to actually go on and do my PhD, and actually had more or less facilitated applying for these PhDs from all these universities, and came to find me during my pre-reg year at Boots in Marble Arch. I couldn't believe it. Wherever she is, Anya, she was amazing, and really tried to convince me to do my PhD. But I was so intent on being in community pharmacy. I was loving the responsibility that my first pre-reg tutor, sort of my manager, had basically thrown me in at the deep end, and I literally was thriving where I was. So suffice to say, I didn't go and do the PhD, and I sort of turned that all down. And went through the ropes with a big multi, sort of, how would I call it, a big pharmacy chain, which was a very great environment for me. The training was brilliant. Everything about it was just what I thought, I wanted to do in a career. So I really very much enjoyed being in community pharmacy. So fast forward, I've gone through, sort of managing the pharmacy department and then managing the pharmacy even after I'd had my children, and trying to juggle the two, sort of careers, my nursing and pharmacy at the same time. But lo and behold, I ended up dropping the nursing because it was just too much to be able to do this too while I had the children who were so young as well. And I certainly wanted to be sort of a hands-on mother for them. So that fell by the wayside, and then I carried on working in community pharmacy. And sometime, sort of probably about 15 years maybe, or 12 years down the line, I really thought I would like to own a pharmacy, and I really would want to do that. However, coming back to the point of women pharmacy owners, we take on the responsibility. I'm lucky I had a very supportive husband who also worked very, sort of incredible hours in the city. So it wasn't the easiest of things for me to just sort of say, I'll use the 100% childcare and then have my own. So I certainly toyed with the idea for a longer time than I actually finally became a community pharmacy owner. Sort of probably going back maybe 2016 was when I qualified. I decided that I would like to do something a little bit more than what I was doing. By that point, I'd spent 7 years running a community pharmacy anticoagulation clinic, and again, I wanted to challenge myself. I wasn't bored. I certainly loved every single day of going to work. I loved the company I was working for. I loved the patients I was seeing. It was just that burning need in me to do something a little bit more. So I applied to do my prescribing course, which I managed to fit in at the weekends. And I'm going to come back to the significance of all of this later, and did that at the weekends. I also was in a lucky position to be able to take a 3-month sabbatical off work, to actually return back to the wards, because I felt that there was a connection between what I was doing as an anticoag pharmacist, pharmacist with specialist interest there, and also actually the bits that I could see, which was cardiac. So it was about the heart failure, was all about that. So I again applied to return to nursing, and really with the idea that the whole, sort of forward view, the London, sort of the program that was in place now by the NHS to really try and bring skills together and bring people together. I felt that I had a skill set that was quite unique in just by accident, really, by the fact that I'd been in acute settings, I've been in community settings, but I've also been in different roles within those areas as well. So it made it very, very easy for me to recognize that there was something of value that I could bring either to my nursing profession or to my pharmacy profession, that I could actually link those two things together. So there comes in obviously the pilot program for sort of GP pharmacists, and I was lucky enough to be one of the first lots who were piloted into that scheme that sort of the Health Education England now sort of set up. So in going there and seeing all these amazing pharmacists and people, and realizing that actually one of the things that was of interest to them was the fact that I was also a nurse, it made it very, very easy for me to then recognize how useful that would be. And certainly I would find it a lot more empowering. I had been almost doing a lot of clinical things in the community pharmacy setting, but actually what had become much more almost really much more apparent to me was that the skills that we could and the sorts of things that we could do in community pharmacy were limitless. And then that brought into the question, what do I do? Do I go back to the community pharmacy role that I'd actually taken a sabbatical of, or do I actually venture into doing my own thing? And things just aligned. There came a pharmacy which was at the right place, the right time, affordability, children a lot more, sort of older, at a stage where I felt that I could, if I had to leave them a little bit more, it wasn't going to be the way I felt was going to be detrimental to them. So the opportunity came at the right time. And of course, everything happened extremely quickly after spending 3 years in the general practice setting, and Stephen's Pharmacy became, my little baby. So that's really sort of in brief how I went from nursing through to pharmacy, back onto the water, then back into pharmacy. But with that in mind, I always felt that it would be the two things working side by side. And I think having those two professional hats on has made it, sort of easier for me, certainly, to have the conversations with the different sides of the healthcare professions who now have to work very closely. So I do understand how it works. And certainly when I was in the general practice, one of the roles that they actually asked me to play at the time was actually to become the practice nurse lead. So I had 1 day a week where my time was actually being the practice nurse lead, and also 4 days a week being the sort of senior clinical pharmacist within the practice, which was a large practice, and thoroughly enjoyed doing that. And it was really nice to have those blended roles. And I think it was the first time I felt really enthused about doing everything that I wanted to do under one roof. And the vision is obviously then that coming into community pharmacy, the skills that I'd harnessed, the skills that I'd developed even further, and the knowledge that I'd acquired, be it, sort of medication reviews, be it, sort of clinically managing, diagnosing, and really autonomously taking care of patients on my own. I was really intent on making sure that comes into community pharmacy. And I think, coming back to the question about, sort of female pharmacy, sort of owners, yes, the statistic is shocking that there are fewer of us. It does take a lot of personal sacrifice. It takes a lot of commitment. But also, I think, from the point of view of doing it, the joy of doing it, I get up in the morning and I can be as exhausted as can be. I'll find a way of being really, really not exhausted and come into work, and I thoroughly love every single day. I can't say any more about that. It's just doing what I'm doing. And, I'm hoping that other women do not feel put off about it in terms of joining or certainly owning their own.
Yeah, what's really evident from everything that you've described in your story is that both nursing and pharmacy were always just the right fit for you.
Yeah.
Like they from everything that you've described, both those things, in a way, being in healthcare for you was like in your blood.
It is.
It's in your blood, right?
Yeah.
And so what I find is really amazing about your story and about how you've been successfully able to transition from, one healthcare profession into another, and now bring those two together, is that, you said something that was really important. And that was that you said that the opportunities in community pharmacy are limitless.
Yeah.
And, this is where I think sometimes as females and, all of us, I think the majority of us will have spent some time in community pharmacy in our careers, right? And I think a lot of us kind of get this feeling of, it's not really my space. It's not, I can work as a superintendent pharmacist, or I could work as a pharmacy manager. But when it comes to owning a pharmacy, it's not my space. And maybe that 2% speaks to us, because we don't see women like yourself, Patricia, who actually own pharmacies. And so there's no there's no obvious role models for us to say, go for it and own the pharmacy. I remember I had the opportunity of buying pharmacy years ago.
Yeah.
And, it was a family friend. I used to go and locum in his pharmacy. Absolutely loved the pharmacy. It was in Colchester. It was in a really nice part of Essex, really lovely. And he said, look, I'm coming up to retirement, and I'd really love for you to take over my pharmacy. And I really thought about it. And I thought, is this the right thing for me? And I look back at that time and I think, if I had seen more women pharmacists who owned pharmacies, maybe I would have been encouraged to take that step, and leap into pharmacy ownership. talk to me about some of those barriers, because, you know, there aren't many women pharmacists who own pharmacies.
Yeah. I mean, so from the point of view of the barriers to maybe engaging, and I can probably speak about it from a personal point of view, and then, sort of then extrapolating it to some of the female pharmacists that I know. One of the things that I found very, very quickly, I feel that I was pretty successful as an employee. Of the two main pharmacy chains that I worked for, a big multiple and then a pretty big enough independent chain. I had great opportunities to learn. I had great opportunities to input into that. From the point of view of management, it all happened very, very quickly. And bearing in mind that I went into pharmacy as a mature student, somewhat, probably about 4 or 5 years, a little bit, or 4 years later than most people if they went straight from school or sixth form. So at that point, going through the process of doing, sort of engaging with one profession and then onto another, by the time I had actually completed my pharmacy degree, I was ready to start a family. I was ready to, not necessarily ready to have children, but that sort of almost happened, pretty much soon afterwards. I was just lucky enough to have sort of managers who didn't see my having a child soon after I'd sort of qualified and be a pharmacy manager of a very big pharmacy. And I basically was in charge of the healthcare department and the photographic department, which was turning around a lot more than some standalone pharmacies. So by the time I got to that stage and I actually said about going on maternity leave, I was really pleasantly surprised when they came back and said, actually, we've got a pharmacy, a store manager job for you, a pharmacy store manager. Would you be able to do it? It's near your home, yada, yada, yada. And of course, I didn't hesitate then to take it up because actually it felt convenient. So then when you talk about the hurdles, I did that role probably about 2 years or so. And it took a lot of self-sacrifice. I had a young baby in tow, and when you're the manager, you probably know this, the alarm goes off, it's your call. Sort of everything happens, it's your call. And I had a husband who was studying for his MBA somewhere far away. So I would then, sort of get up in the middle of the night and I wouldn't dare drive. So I'll get a taxi, go to the shop, go and check what's happened to the alarm. So you can see those sort of things already. As a non-pharmacist, but store manager, I was seeing some of the difficulties that would ensue if I actually owned my own. And I think in as much as I love the role that I was doing, I had the structure of a head office, but it was still my business to take care of, as it were.
Yeah.
So with a young child in tow, that was one. By the time you have the second one, you're already then seeing that you've now got double the effort, double the trouble, as it were, if I can put it that way. As much as you enjoy it, and it was so rewarding. So thinking about owning your own and then having everything land on you, I probably could have done that because I was doing it anyway. But I think you almost felt that if you really came to it, you could almost walk away from it if you had to. So that's one of the hurdles that, I think, sort of younger, I was slightly put off in terms of owning my own, although that passion was always there. Then comes the other bit where if you're really working very hard and you're given the results, then the rewards in terms of, sort of remuneration is great. So then you think about the risks. And I think maybe women inherently are not risk takers. So then you think about, if I own my own, I'm given this perfectly good job, I'm paid pretty well for what I'm doing, and then I'm going to give it up. And then what if it doesn't work? And I think anybody, if they're going to be very honest about it, you will have those thoughts about how this will work when you've got a mortgage, when you've got nursery fees, or when you've got school fees, or whatever that you're committed to financially. So that's another hurdle. And I think what then becomes a little bit more apparent as time goes on is that the timing has to work for you. So I didn't have very much of the luxury. I had great childcare. I had support from family for a few months at a time. Like my mother, who would stay for 6 months, and then once, that was up, she was back to her home country. And then I have, sort of childcare where I'd use a mother's help, and that would then come to an end. And then, fortunately, I then had a situation where I had, sort of live out childcare, which was really solid, and gave me really 5.5 really good years of really good childcare. And that's the opportunity when I then started to be able to look and entertain the idea of what else I could do while I was doing what I was doing, if that makes sense. So the hurdles are not just because sort of even financial at all, or finding the right place at the right time and everything else, but women generally being the care, sort of the caregivers within the home. It is a big decision to make if you're going to have to then maybe miss something from the school or whatever. And I guess in a way, you've got to have the right setup to make sure that that works for you. And I can see that certainly from my colleagues' point of view, and maybe friends that I have around, you own the business. It can be very lonely space, because when all the chips are down, you've got to carry everything going. Okay.
Yeah.
And you've got to be in the right space. It's got to work for you in terms of doing that. And I think that is probably one of the biggest barriers. And then also comes to the point where you're talking about people not necessarily seeing people like themselves. So I was lucky that at the point when I was then really looking at, sort of owning my own, I had gathered a few friends who were actually now running their own pharmacies, and were women as well. And from that encouragement, it made it comfortable in a way for me to entertain that idea and then see it to fruition, if that makes sense. So I think that the most important thing that I would probably say is that has to change. It has to change, because like you said, the more you see like you, the more you will be able to entertain something. And certainly it is doable. I have had people who own their own pharmacies who even told me not to do it. And one of the questions that I had to ask myself was actually, if it's so bad, why are you doing it?
Yeah.
So you've also got to think about part of that bit where you may not necessarily get the right sound bites, and being able to actually shed all of that and accept what it is that works for you at that time and that space that you're in, because we all have a different journey and we're all happy with different types of risk. But if you get the timing right and you get the circumstances right, it will be a leap of faith. But once you take that leap of faith, because it's your decision, you don't go back and you make it work. And for me, that's the space that I had to accept that for me, this was the right time and I was going to make it work for me. Because, like my friend said to me, she goes, once you go forward, you never look back. You don't change, you don't do. And I have had a job where I'd left before and I was told, I've got that open for 6 months. If you want to come back, come back. And I thought there was a reason why I wanted to make that change, although I didn't know what that was going to be. And actually, I am so happy that I made that change, not because I didn't like what I was doing, but I just felt like there was something new waiting for me somewhere out there. And that was to run my own, make my own calls, decide about maybe what services that I want to deliver, how I could change it. And I'm in its infancy in terms of how I want to change community pharmacy. Big words, but I feel that there's so much more that we can give. And certainly with the women that I have connections with now within community pharmacy, I feel like there's so much that we have to give. And, we haven't even started yet. We have not started.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much in what you've said. I love this comment by Ifsanachi. I'm hoping that I'm saying your name correctly. Please do correct me if I've said it wrong. She's saying, I can identify with the points that Patricia's raised as barriers because I experienced the same issues. I think, we've all been through that, where it's like, I certainly remember at the time when I had the opportunity to buy this pharmacy, I was thinking, well, I'm not at that point I wasn't married then. I didn't have children. Those were ambitions that I had for myself. And then you do go through those difficult questions in your mind about how am I going to make this business work, with a family, right? How am I going to make this work without the support? Perhaps you don't have family that live near you. I would have had to, up sticks entirely, moving from a different part of, of London out to Essex. And, it's kind of thinking about, well, what happens when I don't have any support network around me? How am I going to make this work? Right.
Yeah.
But you've really, really amazingly articulated that actually you can overcome those barriers, but it's about having the right pieces of the puzzle in place.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
And I love that Bradley said, but Patricia is an amazing businesswoman who's given outstanding support to her community. Thank you, Bradley. We know that she's amazing, and I really want to touch on this point that you've talked about in terms of female pharmacy owners. They are ready and raring to be the change makers in community pharmacy, aren't they? I have to say, from all the ones that I've spoken to and that I personally know, I see them as really being open and, just really ready to make community pharmacy and help community pharmacy move forward and be those change makers. And I think that's really powerful for us as a profession. The more women pharmacists that come in and become community pharmacy owners, we look at things differently. We view things from a different perspective. And, we want to make changes and, break those barriers. And like you said earlier, develop those clinical services that perhaps previously haven't even been thought about in community pharmacy.
Yeah. And that is the bit where I think, sort of patients will come, and I remember, sort of being, sort of somewhere where the patient will come and say, I actually just didn't understand, and just thank you for talking to me or listening. It doesn't mean that the male don't do that. And before I came on the show, I just asked one of my staff, and I said, what is it that you like about having a female pharmacy controller? What do you think that contributes? And one of the things that she said is that if she, from a client point of view, using the service, there's just something about if she has to deal with something really personally, she feels that going to approach the female there would help. And also, it's certainly out there, and there's a lot of research about the way that women do work collaboratively. So it's not about just getting the results, it's about collaborating and bringing that in. And certainly it shows that the workforce, in terms of having some of these softer skills, or maybe some of these things that would normally help to nurture teams to get success, women can do that, and we can do that very well. So I think there's always this thought that sort of you've got to behave like a man to be able to be successful. I don't think that's the case. And certainly if there's anything that could toughen you up, it's about juggling life. Even if you're not juggling children, it's about juggling relationships. It's family, it's friends, it's work, it's colleagues, it's everything that you come across, neighbors, you name it. Life in itself teaches you, and if you're able to do all of that for somebody, you can do it for yourself. And I cannot tell you how much juggling I did as an employee. I juggled to the core, be it to even just develop myself so that I could go and do that next thing and put my branch forward for the next service that was being talked about by the commissioners or whatever. It's about pushing, and it doesn't mean it has to be a battle. It's just that mentally you've got to put yourself there and say, what, I'm ready to do this. I'm going to give it a try. If it works, it works. And more often than not, you might surprise yourself that it actually works. And frankly, if it didn't work, you've tried. The worst thing is not having tried. So
I absolutely love that. I love that. The worst thing is that you tried at the end of the day, and if it didn't work, then you can always go back to being a community pharmacist and that's the beauty of our sector, right?
Yes.
Beauty of pharmacy, that there are so many different options for us that we'll never really be stuck in the way of a role. I love this from Bradley as well. When you lead from the heart, no one can stop you. Believe in yourself and you will make others believe it too. And it's so true, isn't it? I sense and I feel your real passion for being a community pharmacy owner. And, I know from the conversations that we've had that you really do have an impact on your community, and you've really spent that time going back to that word nurture, to nurture your community. And I think there's so much that we can learn as pharmacy owners if we just step back and, you know, just spend the time in nurturing, right? And I've talked about this a lot on this show, but it's, you know, it is about the relationships. It is about the, you know, the collaborative working, and it is about the public seeing themselves in us.
Yeah.
Right. You know, half the population are women, and, you know, if they're going into community pharmacies and, you know, and they're not presenting our public, right? Gosh, I could continue this conversation for the rest of tonight, honestly. There's so much in this, and I do feel like we need to have more conversations around women pharmacists who are community pharmacy owners, because you know, I think being a business owner is such a rewarding thing.
It is. And, you know, with a, you know, like I was saying to you, you know, you're going to have a challenging day. You know that you're going to have to juggle a lot of things. You're going to have to say, you know, I'll do this now and I'll do that next and I'll do that next. And you always got something to do. And then you've got to then think about the business. And it's now about really sort of knowing how to put all of those things together. But when that's all said and done, the joy of just doing that and having that ability to say, actually, I want to do this today and I want to consider that. And I don't want to consider that, but I will consider, you know, there's so many things that you could do. And just having that autonomy to say, this is it, I will do that. It's an amazing feeling. And, you know, community pharmacies change the 10-year plan, the 5-year forward view, all of those things that have come into place has meant that the opportunities are great for pharmacists everywhere. You know, be it that you're working in community pharmacy, which is where I predominantly am now, really. But there's nothing that I was doing somewhere else that I can't do in the community pharmacy. And I think this is where we need to now get the NHS to really start to look at what community pharmacy can do, because the stock is there. Some of the stock hasn't been developed, but it's great that we've got prescribing coming across the board in a few years' time, and it's going to be implemented in the training. And I think those are the things that will really start to show. And, you know, we just have to think big. We have to think big from the point of view of what can community pharmacy do for its neighborhoods, and how does the NHS, the commissioners, actually facilitate that to really happen in education, in the support, and really actually, and also in the networking. So we've got the primary care networks, but actually, how is it working and how is everybody brought into it? And this is where that conversation needs to go, because I know from the conversations that I have with a lot of female contractors like myself, there is nothing that they think they can't do. The limiting factor is the support to do it, and even actually the lift up, and that's, you know, sort of that encouragement to say, actually try this and do it, and let's see how that results. I sit there, and if I had a passion that was burning in me, is I see people, I dispense for them their long-term conditions. My life, if I had to pick up something that was my soul, is actually managing people with long-term conditions, and actually in a way trying to prevent it in the first place. Why can't I do it in this setup?
Correct.
But it's got to have funding for it to happen and happen properly. And, you know, this is where you can train. This is where we can share skills. We can share knowledge. We can actually, you know, sort of start from somewhere and let it grow. Because if we don't do that, the NHS, which spends a lot of money on long-term conditions, may never really achieve what it wants to achieve ultimately, because we're not using the right resource. 11,000, you know, community pharmacies dotted around the country. You know, that's the starting point. And COVID has shown that. The COVID vaccinations and the opportunity that really community pharmacies just grabbed and managed to deliver vaccinations to the numbers that was never thought about. That in itself speaks volumes. So, I mean, I think this is where, you know, there's so many of us that we can. And if you're interested, you just need to get in on that and don't be put off. Nothing is ever easy. As an employee, it would be difficult, and as an owner, it will be difficult as well. The challenges are always going to be there. You just have to be prepared to work with those challenges.
Oh, I love it. You know what? Thank you so much, Patricia, for everything that you've brought to the conversation today. I have no doubt that there will be pharmacists watching this who will have heard you and thought, you know what? I'm going to take that leap of faith and I'm going to become a community pharmacy owner, right? Because they see your passion and they feel your passion and they feel this this community of female contractors coming together, and and you're there, right? You've got your groups as well where you support one another, and and you encourage each other to develop in community pharmacy. And I have no doubt that there are going to be there are going to be pharmacists who are watching this who are going to think, you know what, I want to own my own pharmacy.
And do it. We need many of us. A few more of us would be really, really good. And I say that because I was encouraged, and I want to encourage others.
Definitely.
The fear. Sometimes I wake up now and I think, what was I worried about? And a lot of the things you worry about, and just one thing to say, 92% of the things we worry about would never happen. Apparently,
so true.
8% might happen, and it's probably already happened. So 9 out of 10 things we shouldn't be worried about. We just need to find a way. If it's already happened, then, well, it has happened.
Yeah.
And if it's not going to happen, why worry about it? So it's really about unpicking what it is that is your barrier. Speak to other people, because everybody's got a different journey, and your barrier, someone else may have overcome it by doing something differently. Talk to people and find out how that works, because I think unless you actually do that, the fears can always put you off before you actually start. And that's the key thing, isn't it? It's about just finding out and pinpointing what it is that holds you back, and then you decide how you're going to troubleshoot that, how you're going to fix it before it even becomes the issue that you think it is, and just run with it. And I love a lot of the women that I've seen. I see that Bati's on there, and faces.
I know. I have such respect for Bharti, and thank you so much, Bharti, for all of your comments. Bharti's last comment there is, Conwell, you should do a leadership course for female pharmacy owners with Patricia. I think what you've just said, though, that nine things out of 10 that you fear are never going to happen, right? I'm a big believer in there is a solution to every problem in the world, right? There's always a solution to every, and it is the law of the universe. There is a problem there is a solution to every problem in the world. So, I truly, truly believe that. And, if we think that having our children and being pharmacy owners is going to be a problem, there's someone like you who's overcome them, right? If we think that, we're going to struggle with all the hours and putting all the time, and well, again, there's someone like you who's overcome it, whom you can have the conversation with, and who can help you to figure out ways of, managing all of those things and juggling everything.
Very, very true. And I know them right now doing it. So, and it really is just to encourage and say, you know what, if that's what you really want to do, do it. I took 24 years or maybe 23 years to come around to doing it for one reason or the other. But actually, my friends from university when I was leaving were absolutely right. I would love the multi-million-pound turnovers. But, from the point of view of just, owning my own pharmacy, it was obviously something that they'd seen that I actually hadn't necessarily recognized sort of myself initially. But certainly the passion was there. And the way I executed it was actually to manage pharmacies very, very well for the different people that employed me. And for me, I loved every minute of doing it. And I feel like I'm in a different season now where I'm actually doing it for myself. So some of it you can learn from doing for others. And then when that time is right for you, you can do for yourself as well. So, just be encouraged, because whatever hurdle you think there is, someone else has fixed that already. And, you can find out how to get across that line.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for your time. I'm so grateful. And thank you guys for watching as well. Bisola and Bharti and Ifesinachi. I'm hoping I'm getting your name right. Please, I do apologize if I haven't got it right. thank you so much for watching. Really, really appreciate you being here. And I really hope that pharmacists listening to you today will think about opening their own pharmacy and becoming pharmacy contractors as a result of your successful journey, Patricia. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you for listening to.
I can't wait to continue this conversation with you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you guys so much for listening to the Happy Healthcare Professionals live show today. I am so encouraged by all of the comments that you guys have been putting on there. Thank you so much. And if you're watching this on the replay, then do feel free to message as well and leave some comments. If you want to get in touch with Patricia, you can do that through LinkedIn. You can do that through Twitter. She's on Twitter as well. I'll make sure that the links are somewhere on the page when you're watching this. And I shall see you at the next episode of the Happy Healthcare Professionals live show very soon. Take care. Bye.